Hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil Live by Mike King. I'm taking a quick break from work to jump in and just kind of get things rolling as we wait for this trial or this hearing to start. This is a arraignment. So now if you think back in time, we had the initial appearance where they were advised of their rights independently. In this case, we're talking Chad. Advised of his rights, ensuring that counsel has been appointed, which we know because Pryor has been with him from the onset. And then, of course, they set the next phase, which is the arraignment, where Chad will enter either a guilty or a not guilty plea. We're waiting for that to happen in the back, but I wanted to just get on for a moment, say hello, thank our mods for taking care of things. I'm already watching some of your comments bouncing back and forth, and a lot of folks are chatting about Lori and the commitment process she's going through. So we'll continue to watch that. And Debbie Utz, thank you so much for that kind super sticker that you just put in. That's really appreciated. I keep waiting for the pretzels, but anyway, yeah. So we're gonna watch. You should have seen my video posted this morning. If not, jump on earlier. We posted my comments and some reaction in regard to Rob Wood changing direction. I think that happened because the state looked at the information that was provided. Their own experts said, "Yeah, you got to give her time to get her mind straightened out." And folks, none of this is a question of whether all this behavior of killing people is crazy. The idea is, how do we get Lori to where she's competent to stand trial? I wanted to go back and play a couple of things to set the stage, and I'll interrupt if the hearing comes up. But right now it's not started live yet, but the moment it starts live, I'll bring this in. But I created a couple of reactionary things in regard to what has happened in the past based on some of the reporting by Nate Eaton at East Idaho News. So I want to play that, and then I'm going to watch for your comments.
I can't tell you how hurt and frustrated and confused I am about what's going on.
Lori Daybell's son making a plea to his mother, telling her to reveal the location of his sister Tylee and brother JJ.
You have the power to end this. You have an opportunity to put this all to rest.
Colby Ryan's plea comes days after investigators searched Chad Daybell's home, retrieving 43 items, including computers, electronic devices, journals, cell phones, and personal things.
Now, folks, we kind of jump back in time a little here, and I hope this doesn't frustrate anyone, but I wanted to kind of paint the picture of where we've come. And I thought Colby's comments were just so telling of the pain that is felt by everyone. There are no winners in these cases, and certainly Tylee, JJ, Tammy, Charles, Joseph, I believe. I guess you could say Alex. There are no winners, and then of course all of the ancillary people who have been so damaged by this. It's just absolutely terrible. But let's go on here.
Is concerning.
Fremont County Sheriff Len Humphreys referring to the death of Lori's former husband. Charles B.O.L.O. was shot and killed in July while picking up JJ from Lori in Chandler, Arizona. Police said he was shot in self-defense, and the man who pulled the trigger, Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who died a month ago. The cause of his death has not been released.
Now, this part we do know that now Arizona officials are looking at. This is sitting in the county attorney's lap. The police department has turned over their investigation in the case of Charles B.O.L.O. and his homicide, and we're waiting for them to come back. If you remember a year or more ago, one of my videos, I talked about the other shoe will fall, and that certainly is the other shoe falling in a dramatic way. So we know that things are happening there. Let's continue this on just a moment. Let's see.
Tylee's dad, Joseph Ryan, passed away of an apparent heart attack in 2018. He had been divorced from Lori for some time.
Now, I wanted to stop there for a moment because I wanted to call out the conversation that I had a year ago with Chris was on with me at that time when we brought Annie Cushing, who was Joseph Ryan's sister and the aunt of Tylee, on. And those of you who have followed this case know Annie, what an amazing soul she is, and haven't wanted to bother her, but at some point we'll get her back on. But of course, then we got to really think about, even though they've gone back and reevaluated the Joseph Ryan case, it's so intriguing when you see all these dominoes falling around Lori Daybell and now Chad Daybell, that I think it continues to be worthy of deeper investigation. Let's carry this on just a little further.
Then there's Chad's former wife, Tammy Daybell, who died at her home in Salem October 19th.
Deputies responded. They took pictures. They looked it over, contacted our detectives. Detectives had a few questions. They satisfied those. Didn't see anything that alarmed them.
Was Chad Daybell acting interesting or suspicious or normal?
To my knowledge, he was responding like anybody would whose spouse had just passed away. That's why the deputies didn't suspect anything suspicious.
A few days later, Humphreys says his office was alerted by detectives in Arizona about the other deaths. Tammy's body was exhumed from the Spring Hill, Utah Evergreen Cemetery, and an autopsy was performed.
Yeah, and that brings us to where we are now with Chad and everyone being brought into the picture here. In fact, let me just play the rest of that because it is kind of interesting, this final piece from Cole.
I'm so hurt. I'm so hurt by all of this. Can't tell you how many people are hurt by this.
So I mean, I think that really kind of sets the stage. Now I'm gonna bring in the live stream, and they haven't started yet. So I just wanted you to know that while I'm rambling, it's not because there's something going on in the background. This case is going to continue to be a big deal for quite some time, and it now appears that Pryor will get his wish with what's going on with Lori Daybell. Chad will have a separate trial, I would suspect. The thing that will be interesting is to see if their marriage dissolves, and if it does, if that opens the opportunity for the spousal privilege to go away and have one testify against the other. And I think a lot of you have theorized over time that it makes sense that one would turn on the other. So we'll continue to let that run in the background. And let me just go and look and see if there are some questions here. And thanks everybody for jumping on. This was supposed to start 8 minutes ago, and we'll let it run for a few minutes and see what's going on, and hope we can get things going here. Let me see. I agree with a lot of your comments. It breaks your heart to see Colby and the pain that he's going through. Michelle, welcome. And a great reminder to all of you, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, would you please consider subscribing? Just hit the little subscribe button below and make sure you're ringing the bell so that you get the notifications and you keep up to date on what's going on. I missed this earlier to put it up, but Mrs. Bardock, thank you so much for that kind super chat. That is really nice. And oh, here we go. I finally found it again. Really appreciate that. And then Kathy, I agree. Please, everybody, hit the like button too. That helps us with some of our ratings with YouTube as we go through this. Barbara McGuire, I think you're saying what everyone is feeling, that our hearts go out to all the people who are impacted by this. This will be interesting, and I want to pull up Tyzara's note. I bet Chad blames her, even though he's the one who wrote all the crazy books. I mean, this is like putting a great big flame on a bucket of gasoline, isn't it? When those two came together in space and time, and how that happens is just a wacky thing that people like that can come together and then create a following that is sympathetic to the belief system of this doomsday mentality. And you can read about things like that and about the mentality of cults, cult recruitment behaviors, and other things in my book, Deceived. And please take a chance to look at that. In fact, I think Amazon is running a killer deal right now in the ebook for like $2.99 or $3.99 to get it as part of a little promotion that they're running. And the book jumped from number 75,000 in their ranks to about number 2,000, I think, the last time I heard. Now, I hope that's still the case. I hope it's going faster than that. And you're not used to seeing me this way, are you? So, Lady MB, yeah, it's a work day. I've actually got some meetings that I'm having to do this telecommuting. There still are times when I have to do my things. So that's funny. Let's see here. And I hope you're all just kind of chat. It looks like you are chatting back and forth and visiting. In a moment, I'm going to just put this screen up full screen, and we'll sit and wait. And hopefully you're typing away at your desks or whatever else, doing whatever you can. This is interesting. Choco 8 Milk. Lori not competent for trial opens up for Chad to blame Lori. I wonder what's going to happen in all of that, and how, again, this spousal challenge will work, because spouses cannot be compelled to testify against their spouse. Now, if there's a divorce, then that becomes interesting in and of itself. And yeah, I keep hoping that maybe Chad just got bamboozled and saw the Lori batting her eyes and telling him he's a god and great, and believed all this stuff, and that there are not more murders in Chad's background than starting with Tammy and then JJ. Well, starting with JJ and Tylee and then Tammy. But Lori, it's really interesting. And if you go back to the story map, and if you haven't been to the story map, please go into profilingevil.com and then click on the link for story maps and scroll down to the Daybell story map, because we kind of break down Lori and Tammy and Chad independently, what their relationship was like when they first met, some of the video and audio of Chad sharing his philosophy on life after death and everything like that. Then, of course, Lori and her evolution of going through husband to husband to husband. And then how those two kind of come together, and when the particles collide, then we start seeing all these other things unfolding, which is kind of frightening too. So we'll just you might enjoy that. Please go and watch it and play around on it. It gives you some maps to explore and other things. So let's see. And you all know how nervous I get when there's dead time. The back office keeps telling me I need to chill out and just read the comments and enjoy the experience with you. That's an adjustment for me, but I'm trying. Good to see so many of you on. Kathy Griffith, Stace on the Case, Maui Girl. Really, really nice that you all would take a moment. There's a lot of people visiting that I don't believe are subscribers to the channel. Would you please consider subscribing? We love the opportunity to grow, but that more importantly will give you an opportunity to ring the bell and get notified as we start adding additional content like we did this morning. Thanks for this kind donation, Andy. As soon as Dr. deems Lori fit and she's arraigned, if they blame Alex for it, how do you think it will be handled? So that's really a great question. And the thing that's so cool about whatever Alex's role was on it, I think the state's going to be able to prove that means and motive and opportunity, that the people benefiting were Lori and Chad. And I find this a lot in cases, especially in cult cases where the minions end up, thanks, Emma, the minions end up doing the dirty work for the leader. And in the Lafferty murder case that I've talked about a little bit from time to time, if you remember, Ron Lafferty believed that he was the voice of God, that he was the one receiving revelation of who should be executed and who shouldn't. And then his brother, Dan, had been knighted with this grandiose position that you are the arm of the Lord. You're the one that goes out and commits the murders for me, the voice of the Lord. They both were found guilty of homicide. They both were sentenced to the rest of their lives in prison. And it wasn't the actual person who slit the throats of the victims that got the death penalty. It was the voice. So these two are definitely not out of the woods, regardless of how they paint Alex, because the law enforcement's going to be able, through those pings, to put Alex at the scene of Lori's house, Chad's house. The three of them are together. And there's history. If you go back to Joseph Ryan, Alex becomes the arm of Lori to protect her and assaults Joseph Ryan, puts him in the hospital. Alex goes to jail for a short period of time, sadly. And then along comes Charles Vallow. And again, the voice of wackiness, Lori, says, in my opinion, something needs to be done. And Alex steps right up as the arm of wackiness. And the next thing we know, there's a fight in the home, and Charles Vallow is shot 4 times and killed. And Alex is calmly sitting on the curb, rubbing a little scratch on the back of his head. Then he suddenly dies. So that's kind of odd behavior too. So all of this is just so interesting to watch unfold. Angela Vincent, thank you for that kind donation. Appreciate that. I think I've got it here. I want to put it up and say thank you. JB, the case should be renamed Immaculate Deception. Cracks me up. Let's see. Yeah, here's a great question, Jeanette. What kind of person goes to a pool party when their husband just died? And of course, if you remember, and we don't have that video right here to pop up real quickly, but if you remember, Lori and Ty Lee are out on the curb. The officer walks up and says, "Hey, sorry, your husband's dead." And she kind of giggles and says, "Hey, welcome to the neighborhood. You know, we're here." Holy cow. How on earth do you put those kinds of things together in a way that makes sense? It just doesn't make sense. Amanda, thank you so much. I watched your videos and enjoy how you explain every fact, giving clear detail. And you are really kind, Amanda. I hope I don't just like bore you to tears and put you to sleep because I don't get crazy and shout and jump up and down. And frankly, as you know, I really won't report on stuff unless it's then been released by the proper sources. I believe the proper source is the court or law enforcement. If the media is talking about it, I'll jump in and share what the media is talking about. But there are so many things, and 99% of them are true, that I hear from people that are affiliated with the case that reach out and say, hey, I want to share something with you. And I just won't share it until a person with the right authority first does it. And I really feel like it's a responsibility we have in this true crime community to allow the professionals, law enforcement, and the courts to do their thing in the processes and the order that it needs to be done. We listened to that sheriff who said, hey, from day 2 or 3 on Tammy Daybell's death, and you notice he didn't say on day 1. He said we went, it all appeared normal. We allowed it to go, and then we heard from Arizona officials that Lori had other people associated with her that were dying, and all of a sudden they kind of pulled back the reins and said we need to look deeper. I just think law enforcement needs to be given the chance to do it their way. So JRS, Lori always behaved as if she was drinking something or smoking something. I don't know. Well, here we go. Let's see how this goes today. Hey, thanks everybody for joining. Please hit the like and the subscribe button, and we'll get rolling. Let me see.
The FTR
There we
recording
go.
system. It's also being live streamed on the court's YouTube channel for public availability of the hearing. In addition, in order to allow public access, we do have limited seating here, and that's consistent with our Supreme Court's operating order for social distancing. So we do have people in the courtroom as well, pursuant to that order. Mr. Daybell, as you know, I'm Judge Boyce. I'm the district judge for Fremont County, and I've been assigned to preside over this case. In a few minutes, I'll arraign you on criminal charges that have been brought against you by the state of Idaho, pursuant to an indictment that was issued by a grand jury. Before doing so, I'll explain what will happen at this arraignment and then advise you of your constitutional rights and plea options. If at any time you need to communicate with Mr. Pryor in confidence, please advise me. We can arrange to have the two of you in a separate place outside the record of the court or anyone else and have a personal discussion if you require that during the time of this hearing. In this case, there was an indictment issued by the grand jury on May 25th, 2021, and that indictment sets forth the criminal charges that have been brought against you. The indictment's not evidence, rather it sets forth the criminal charges against you that would be prosecuted by the state of Idaho in this case. Mr. Pryor, have you received a copy of the indictment and reviewed that with your client, Mr. Daybell? Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Pryor. In a moment then, Mr. Daybell, I will advise you of the charges that are pending against you and explain the penalties associated with those charges. Next, I'll discuss, Mr. Pryor, your plea options and rights. The purpose of an arraignment is to have you enter a plea to the charges in the indictment. At the end of the arraignment, then you'll be asked to enter a plea. In that regard, you would have 3 options. Your first option is that you may enter a plea of not guilty to the charges. If you elect to plead not guilty, then a jury trial and a pretrial conference will be scheduled in this case. Also, by pleading not guilty, you would maintain all of your constitutional rights in this case, which rights were previously explained to you at an initial appearance on May 26, 2021 before the magistrate. Among those rights, you have, I'll go through some of those. You have the right to be presumed innocent. The presumption of innocence is a real and important right which lies at the foundation of our criminal justice system. Therefore, unless you either plead guilty at a later date or the state proves the charges against you beyond a reasonable doubt at trial, the presumption of innocence remains in your case. You also have the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of your peers, as well as the right to see, hear, confront, and have your attorney question all witnesses who may be called to testify against you. During the pendency of your case and at trial, you also have the right to be represented by an attorney. As you are in custody, you also have the right to communicate with your attorney at all stages of your case, and reasonable access to communicate with your attorney will be provided throughout these proceedings. At your trial, you would have the right to present evidence in your defense and the right to the subpoena power of this court. to compel the attendance of witnesses to testify on your behalf. And finally, if you plead not guilty, you will retain the right to remain silent and exercise the privilege against compulsory self-incrimination. This means that you cannot be required to testify against yourself. However, you may voluntarily take the witness stand at trial if you so choose, but you cannot be compelled to do so. If you decide not to testify in your own behalf, then the prosecuting attorney could make no remarks about your failure to testify and cannot imply to the jury that exercising your constitutional right to remain silent is any indication of your guilt. The second option you would have today is to enter no plea at all. If you decide to do that, the court would enter a plea of not guilty for you, and you'd continue to maintain all of the rights that I've previously explained. And your third option at this arraignment is that you may plead guilty to any or all of the charges. However, it is important that you understand that if you do plead guilty, you would automatically waive rights, including rights under the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, as well as similar rights contained in the Idaho Constitution. In other words, if you decide to plead guilty, you would waive your right to a trial. There'd be no trial in your case, and you'd no longer be presumed innocent. The state would no longer have the burden of proving the case against you beyond a reasonable doubt. By pleading guilty, you would also give up your 6th Amendment right to confront your accusers and cross-examine any witnesses against you, and give up your right to offer evidence of your own behalf in response to the state's case against you. You would also waive any defenses you have to the charges contained in the indictment, including any claims that there is a defect in the state of Idaho's case against you, or that you've been treated unfairly by the court. Give up also your 5th Amendment right to remain silent and the privilege against self-incrimination. And if you were to plead guilty, you would also be required to testify under oath concerning the facts of the alleged offenses in this case, to allow me to determine whether or not there's a factual basis for your plea, whether the plea would be made knowingly, freely, and voluntarily, and to determine whether or not you fully understand the consequences of that plea. Finally, you are advised, if you decided to plead guilty, any testimony that you give while under oath concerning the alleged offenses could and would likely be used against you at a later trial if I were to not accept your plea for some reason, or if you later withdrew your plea. It's very important you understand all the rights and options I just explained to you. Before we go any further then with this proceeding, Mr. Daybell, do you have any questions on any of those rights I've just explained to you? Very well. Mr. Daybell, in this case, then you were brought before this court to answer for the indictment filed in this case, which alleges you've committed serious crimes in that 8 felony charges have been filed in the grand jury's indictment. In that indictment, let me ask you a question, Mr. Pryor, do you have that before you? Copy of the indictment? All right. Is the defendant's name, Mr. Daybell, spelled and listed correctly on that indictment on the caption? All right, thank you. At this time then, I will go through the charges that are listed in the indictment and the penalties for each charge. After doing that, then, Mr. Pryor, I'll ask your client how he pleads. So I'll read through the list of charges first, and then I'll ask for the plea after that. Then the indictment that was filed on May 25th, in count 1, charges Mr. Daybell the offenses of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception, both felony counts under Idaho Code 18-1701, 18-4003A, 18-24031, 18-24034A, 18-24071B3. The count in count 1 names Tylee Ryan as the victim on the murder charge, and that count carries a penalty on the murder charge of it is punishable by death or imprisonment for life, and it provides that if the death penalty is not pursued by the state, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. The grand theft portion of that charge has a penalty of up to 14 years of prison and a fine of up to $5,000 and possible restitution. That's a summary of those charges. and you've waived the reading of the charges. So let me ask you on that count one, Mr. Daybell, do you understand the charge and those possible penalties? Okay. The next count in the indictment is count two. That is a count of first degree murder under Idaho Code 184001, 184002, 184003, subsection A, and 184004. And that count names Tylee Ryan as the victim. The possible penalty or punishment for that count is by death or imprisonment for life. And if the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. You understand that charge and the possible penalties? Count three of the indictment charges conspiracy to commit first degree murder and grand theft by deception. Those are felonies under the same code sites that were previously listed under count one. That count names Joshua Jackson Vallow, also known as J.J. Vallow, as the named victim in that count. And the penalty for those charges on the conspiracy to commit first degree murder is punishable by death or imprisonment for life. And if the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. On the charge of grand theft by deception, that would have a penalty of up to 14 years in prison, a fine of up to $5,000. You understand the charge in count three and those possible penalties, Mr. Daybell? Sure. Very well. Count four of the indictment charges you with first degree murder, a felony under the statute previously cited, and the other counts also. That count names J.J. Vallow as the victim, and again is punishable by death or imprisonment for life. If the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of up to 10 years. You understand count four and the possible penalties, Mr. Daybell? All right, the next count listed in the indictment is count five, conspiracy to commit first degree murder. That count names Tammy Daybell as the named victim. It's charged again under Idaho Code 184001, 184003, subsection A, and 181701. And that count is also punishable by death or imprisonment for life. And if the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. Do you understand the charge in count five and the possible penalties? Count six of the indictment is a charge of first degree murder. That names Tammy Daybell as the victim. It's charged under Idaho Code 184001, 18204, and 184003, subsection A. That count also is punishable by death or imprisonment for life, provided that if the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. Do you understand count six and those possible penalties, Mr. Daybell? All right, count seven of the indictment is not a charge against you, it's a charge against a co-conspirator. Count eight of the indictment charges you, Mr. Daybell, with the crime of insurance fraud, which is a felony under Idaho Code section 41293. That is a felony that carries up to 15 years in prison and a fine of up to $15,000 plus restitution. You understand that charge and those possible penalties? All right, count nine is also a charge of insurance fraud under that same statute. It carries the same penalty I just mentioned in count eight, which again is 15 years of prison and a $15,000 fine plus restitution. You understand that charge and those possible penalties? All right, that is a summary then of the charges that have been filed against you and the penalties. I would also note those penalties in each of the counts could be ordered to be served either concurrently, meaning running together, or consecutively. And so do you understand those charges could also run consecutively in those different counts, Mr. Daybell? All right, at this time then, having gone through the counts and the possible penalties, at this point, I would ask your client how he intends to plead. Before I do that, Mr. Pryor, do you have any questions for the court or anything you need to discuss with your client before I ask for the plea? All right. Thank you, Mr. Pryor. I will go through them then individually again. On count one of the indictment, Mr. Daybell, how do you plead? Enter the not guilty plea on count one. On count two, how do you plead? On count three, how do you plead? On count four, how do you plead? On count five, how do you plead? On count six, how do you plead? On count eight, how do you plead? And on count nine, how do you plead? Very well. Not guilty pleas are entered as to all the counts in the indictment. At this time, normally we would discuss a trial setting. I talked to counsel and chambers before we started, and given the nature of the case, we've determined that we'll set a scheduling conference 2 weeks from today to get a trial set. Does your client agree to a scheduling conference in 2 weeks and we're in a trial setting right now, Mr. Pryor? Let's not discuss that. All right, very well. Do you understand then we'll set your trial in 2 weeks and we're doing that today, Mr. Daybell? Okay. So we'll hold that hearing on June 23rd. Council, any suggestions on time? I'm thinking probably just in the morning at 9:30.
That works for the state as well, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, I'll set the scheduling conference for June 23rd at 9:30 a.m. We will conduct that hearing by Zoom. That will not be a live in-person proceeding. And at that time, we will get the matter set for a trial on these counts. I believe that concludes the matters we need to bring up on this case this morning. Then, is there anything further from the state on the case today?
Nothing further from the state at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Anything further from the defense, Mr. Pryor? You may. Thank you, counsel. That will conclude the hearing and we'll be in recess.
Well, there you go. It looks like in 2 weeks they will schedule the preliminary hearing. That sounds like is probably not going to be live, but we'll just keep pushing the information through as it comes in, and we'll see where this thing takes us next. Thank you to all of you for taking time today to jump on. Again, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, would you please consider doing so? We really enjoy having you in on the family. And if you ring that bell, you'll get notifications when we release things. To all of the mods, again, thank you. And to all of you for jumping on this busy day. Thanks. Have a great day.